Okay, so this is about, I guess, a an old idea in sociology, the difference between community and society, uh, and and the way that that might change as people move into cities. So, like, those are the kind of contextual cues that I'm seeing in this first sentence. One of the most significant impacts of urbanization is the change in community structures. Yeah, it's an abstract way of thinking about the way people interact, the relationships they understand themselves as having with others. And I think the classic contrast is between like the small rural village where you know who your family members are, you know who your extended family are, you know who your neighbors are, and you know who's rich and who's poor, you know all of those things are more or less fixed in place. And so the kinds of interactions you have to have with everybody are predictable, and those relationships have a structure. Um, so in the second sentence, there's a contrast then. Traditional tight-knit communities, and we're using a kind of metaphor of things being knitted together like fabric, often give way to more anonymous, individualized urban lives. So we're imagining being in cities where you might not know everybody who lives in the same building as you. You certainly wouldn't know everyone who lives on your street. You might not live in the same place more than a few months at a time. Mm, mm. We can kind of guess. So that's what we mean by giving a tight-knit community giving way to a more anonymous, individualized form of living. Yeah, one is replacing the other. So yeah, giving way to is getting out of the way of, or like with a car, like giving way. Yeah. So one thing is replacing the other, one thing is transforming into the other. And that's the context for that first choice, where social bonds can be more fluid. That is, yeah, that is they flow. Like fluid is literally a state of matter, but metaphorically, it means that they flow and change. Um, that people move out of traditional communities and into cities. So they don't say it directly, but urbanization is also about people moving. So sometimes it's about people moving, sometimes it's about places becoming more dense, like more people arriving. Um, yeah, that's right. So the classic model is that because of economic and political reasons, people can't stay in rural countryside. They move to cities to get jobs or to find a way of living. And when they get there, they don't know everybody and they move around a lot. And so they have fluid social bonds, less reliable. Yeah, solid bonds would be more reliable. So if you imagine trying to build something on on something fluid, something that moves, it wouldn't be reliable. Um, but if it was solid, which is you're right, that's the right contrast here, then you could build more reliably. It might even mean that you have an open relationship. That is, if you have a fluid relationship, it could mean, yeah, that it changes a bit. Like sometimes we get on well, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we see each other a lot, sometimes we see each other less. Um, mm, it might imply that. Paradox that they're talking about here. Like people live close together, but but kind of paradoxically, they are isolated from each other because they don't, because they have those fluid, less reliable connections. So, like when I moved into my current apartment, I could hear the people upstairs. Like I could hear what time of night they went to bed because it's, very thin walls and floors. I knew all of that about them, but I didn't know what their names were. So you can imagine you're living very close to people, but you're isolated from them. You still don't necessarily feel like you're part of a community or you have a connection with people around you. So that's the paradox. So that amid crowds, it's got to be something about um, being a kind of paradox or, yeah, ironically, amid crowds. Mm. Yeah, to promote or to allow to grow a sense of isolation. Yeah. Because when we talk about fostering, we're talking about like you could foster a dog or you could foster a child. That is, they temporarily come into your home and you support them. So so you're fostering him if you look after him temporarily, but you're still supporting him. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, allowing to grow within a crowd. If you're in the middle of, so we're inside of a very busy crowd, a very crowded place, but ironically, we're feeling less connected to others.
So, uh, but yeah.
It can mean a few different things, but usually irony is about um, when something uh, when something is contrary to expectation. So it could be when the meaning of what you use is opposed to how you're using it. So like um if if someone if someone was very quiet and you said, "Oh, here comes, this guy. He's, this noisy guy." Or, when there's a really big guy and they call him Tiny. Like that's his nickname. That's an ironic nickname. Yeah. Yeah, Little John in Robin Hood. That's right. He's a big guy. They call him Little John. Um, or in Australia, if someone has red hair, like Scottish red hair, they might call him Blue. Um, it's like an ironic nickname. Like when you look at him, it's like he's red. He's red, not blue, but they call him Blue. Yeah. Yeah, so urbanization often exacerbates socioeconomic inequalities. That is, it makes people less equal. So that whole process of people coming into cities and of um, I guess different ways that people organize their economic and their social lives, you actually end up with a greater discrepancy. Like the people at the top of the pile in terms of wealth or power end up much more wealthy or powerful, and people at the bottom end up by contrast. Mhm. So they're talking about the aggregate effects of urbanization, not so much the individual feeling of being isolated or not, but how urbanization as a whole process. Like if you have lots of people in one place, um, for example, things like services become cheaper. Um, the scale of businesses that you can run become larger. You have a whole lot of different things coming together, but I think the point of this sentence is that people can see it more clearly in a city. Um, that is Like if I drive 30 minutes towards the coast, I'll be in a very rich suburb. If I drive 30 minutes inland, I'll see that that's a place that poorer people can afford to live. And I think that's the point they're making here. Um, I personally disagree with this point because I've been to Australian country towns, and sometimes the rich person's house is at the one end of the street and the poor people's houses are at the other. Like you can see them from each other's balcony or whatever. So I'm not sure that I agree with this, but that's the point they're making. They're saying that we see those contrasts in cities. They're bigger, they're more obvious. Exacerbates. So, yeah, exacerbates. Yeah, yeah.
Exacerbate.
Mm, okay. Mm. So affluent neighborhoods starkly contrasted against underprivileged areas. So that contrast, you're looking for something that is an antonym for underprivileged. And affluent is a word that's often attached to wealth. So it's like saying with wealthy neighborhoods starkly contrasted against poor neighborhoods. Um, that that's right. Affluent almost always means wealthy or so you might be thinking of a different word. There's yes, it could that could be like if someone is very good at securing grants, they might use that label. Um, s- starkly here is it's severe or harsh. Like it's a very obvious or clear cut difference. Mhm. Under underprivileged is it's a very roundabout word. It's a word that people use when they don't want to use
underprivileged,
a more um a more provocative way of explaining it. Like if you called these areas poor, if you said they were poor areas, then the idea of poverty, some people feel like they're supposed to respond to the idea of poverty um, because of the it being a kind of ethical or moral duty. So it's maybe more of a an emotive way of phrasing it, whereas underprivilege is a very neutral or inert way of like we're just describing that there's relative privilege and that these groups are underprivileged. Yeah, that would be people who had a mix of wealth and social resources. Yeah, like who do you know? Like if you're privileged, you might not own any property, but your parents might be wealthy and you might know lots of rich people, some of whom will give you jobs. Mm, mm. I think we don't usually talk about um countries in terms of privilege, like at the national level. You might talk about underdeveloped, or you might talk about um about some kind of socioeconomic difference there. Yeah, I guess in usage we don't usually talk about underprivileged countries. We usually talk about underprivileged areas or groups. Yeah. Yeah, so some of them certainly. Yeah. I think like some parts of southwest and western Sydney are underprivileged. So if I were to go to the state archives, they're at a place called Kingswood, but that's next to a suburb called St Mary's, and St Mary's is definitely an underprivileged area. There are lots of poorer people living there. There's like social housing, there's government provided housing. Um, or if I were to go somewhere like Liverpool, Liverpool itself has kind of a central business district, but near to there are also underprivileged areas. Yeah. These challenges not only degrade quality of life, but also raise questions. So this is about the two verbs being consistent. Degrade, the challenges degrade quality of life and raise questions. Mm. Yeah, so the subject here is challenges. Raise. They raise. Yeah, so it's because the subject there is challenges. So these challenges degrade life and raise questions. Yeah.